It's us so far.
Here.
Oh, I see Diane Penny from Cape Breton. Hello. I see Jennifer Tipple from Newfoundland. Playing a little bit of romper room here, looking at names. Ray in Charlottetown.
Nice.
So I see that we've got the East Coast covered. Who's here from the West Coast? Caitlin from York region. And no, the question is, are your cameras on? No, your cameras are not on. You are muted. Don't worry about that.
That being said, we do have plans of having lots of discussion with people. And so we hope to be able to unmute many of you so that we can have a good conversation. And again, for people who are just coming in, either type in the website address slido.com or scan the QR code and type in your information so that we can see on the screen where everybody's from and what kind of work you do.
Sasha from Halton. I'm seeing Ontario and the East Coast so far.
So I think we'll give it another couple of minutes just to allow people to join in before we get officially started. A lot of Charlottetown representatives. Nice.
Erica from Halton.
If you're just coming in, just let us know where you're from, either by scanning the barcode in Slido and letting us know on the screen or in the chat. That's fine either way. We're happy to have you here.
It is funny to me that one of the unexpected things that happened during the pandemic is the QR code made like this huge comeback. You almost didn't see it at all anymore before the pandemic, and now it's everywhere.
Oh, I see Ashley Vandermark is here. Always good to have our colleagues in on it as well.
I guess scanning a QR code is hygienic.
I guess.
And if you just came in with that sound bite, it would be really weird.
So we're happy to have everybody here. Looking down.
I'm glad you figured it out, Christine.
Which is good. Just people, so people know there will be some additional polls like this in the next little while. Once you've signed in, you won't have to sign in again. So as long as you're signed in, as soon as a slide with another poll comes up, it'll automatically trigger the change on your device. So this is a handy platform that way.
Admin and development figuring prominently, apparently.
Oh, how did that happen?
Not really sure. Finally, housing prominent. We could blow that one up and make it the human right of all of this, and then we'll be good. We can just log off and be done.
So we do want to let you know this is not just an exercise in people utilizing a polling platform. That we will be getting into an actual webinar and discussion on the topic we promised, but I just want to make sure we have people having a chance to come in.
Now I still haven't seen any West Coast representation here. I don't think that Quinn and Wally count. They're both in Alberta, but that's not West Coast. So let us know where you're coming from.
No, I mean, it's between 16 and 20 hours drive for me to get to the ocean. So I'm guessing that doesn't make me count as West Coast.
No. I'm seeing some Hamilton here. I see Earl.
And Quinn, you don't even like the ocean.
He doesn't like the ocean. This is I work with him every day, and I can't understand it. If anybody here can chime in on why Quinn needs to change that perspective in his life, feel free to help me out.
I like the ocean just fine. I just fish poop in there. I don't want to swim in it. It's nice to look at.
That is the most positive thing I've ever heard him say about the ocean. But he is one of those Saskatchewan people who wears bunny hugs. So there's that too.
Whatever that is.
Right.
Bunny hug, Vico, off sale. Somebody's here from Regina. They know what I'm talking about.
There's nobody here from Regina.
If there is anyone from Regina, you might need to help out Quinn.
So folks, I think we've been at 33 participants here for a few minutes. Probably a good clue for us to get going. You think, guys?
Let's do it.
All right. So welcome everybody to this webinar today. As you know, we're here to essentially talk about self-care in the workplace, self-care related to dealing with the challenges of something like a pandemic, and how do we be our best us in the process of that. We are going to have this be a fairly informal event. We're going to share a couple of things with you, mostly in the form of poll questions that will be on slides. But we want to generate conversation. We want this to be an opportunity for support, an opportunity for you to talk about what challenges you are facing or challenges you know other people are facing, difficulties that are occurring within your organization around self-care. And we want to be able to talk about what's happening, what are the common things that we're seeing, and then talk about ideas and strategies and solutions for addressing that. So we will get into that. I hope that people are prepared to share. This is what a community of practice is sharing with each other, helping each other. This isn't about us necessarily coming in here and being an expert for you. We think that you probably actually know a lot more about your own well-being than we do. And so we want to be able to give that expert hat back to you so that you can help and support each other. And there might be some things that we might be able to add to this that can be of benefit. So that being said, I do want to do a land acknowledgement. This is a national land acknowledgement that we have chosen to use for the Canadian Alliance. And I'll just go ahead and read that out. From coast to coast to coast, we acknowledge the ancestral territory of all of the Inuit, Métis, and First Nations people that call this land home. We recognize the historic and ongoing impacts of colonization and are committed to decolonization of our systems and ongoing reconciliation, guided in our work by the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, the TRC calls to action, the murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls calls to justice, and the principles of empowerment and self-determination. Canadian Alliance to End Homelessness is committed to equity, dignity, justice, and belonging, and we are dedicated to serving equity-seeking communities as anti-racist, anti-oppressive, and inclusive allies. Please, understand that we are also respectful of your very individualized lands, but we try to do this because we are actually approaching you today from a national perspective Our mission, as everyone is well aware, is about ending homelessness and how we can best support communities in doing that. And I think that that is definitely fitting for our topic today, because if people are not well, if people are struggling with things like a pandemic, and how we know how this pandemic has greatly impacted your work, that it impacts then your ability to help end homelessness. So this is an important topic, and one that we really feel passionate about. I'm not going to belabor this slide too much. I think pretty well all of you are familiar with our organization. These are kind of the key separate departments or areas that we work in. And you can go to the Canadian Alliance website and click on any one of these to go to a link to their separate websites or separate pages. So feel free to do that. We also want to acknowledge the federal government, as we are able to do webinars like this due to, in part, by their funding that they provide us. And so we're grateful for that. Want to introduce you to us. You can see us on the screen, and so I didn't put our pictures on here. I will let each of them introduce themselves, but I will first introduce myself. I am Wally Check. I'm the director of the Training and Technical Assistance Program. I've been with the Canadian Alliance since the Training and Technical Assistance Program started. I came in to build up that program, and since I've had the opportunity to work with many great colleagues and experts in various areas. First of all, in the form of a training faculty, contracted trainers that I would pull in from time to time to do different things. But now I have the great honor and luxury of having two great staff people work with me, and I'm excited that they're here and can share and be part of all of this. So I'll go in order of who came into the organization. So that would be Jody was first in. So Jody, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name is Jody Yurkowski-Pace. My pronouns are she and her, and I'm joining you today from Halifax, Mi'kma'ki. Yeah, it's been a great time working with the Canadian Alliance. I started just before the pandemic. So really one of the things about this that I wanted to highlight is that we are all remote workers in the Canadian Alliance. So anybody here who is working remotely or is spending a lot of time at home can really, we can identify with that, because that's the kind of work we do as well. And so I can speak from personal experience to say that working remotely all the time is tough. And that wasn't the way it was sort of meant to be for my role, and hopefully won't be moving forward. But this webinar comes out of that desire in part to connect with folks who have had to shift their jobs and do things in a way that they didn't plan on doing them. So welcome.
And Quinn.
Hi guys, my name's Quinn. My pronouns are he, him, and I'm coming to you from Edmonton, Alberta, on Treaty 6 territory. And yeah, I think just to echo everything that Jody said, the pandemic's been very difficult. One of the first things that I was asked to do when I came on board to the Canadian Alliance was to do a webinar on self-care in the early days of the pandemic. And well, we thought it was going to be a lot shorter back then. And so reevaluating what that might look like for all of us is, I think, something we're all kind of grappling with. And I'm just really interested and excited to be a part of a community of practice today that can examine some of these issues and talk about them.
Amazing. Thanks to both of you. And again, I can't say enough about having you as part of this team. So we're going to get rolling with a couple of poll questions. And what I want to preface that with is that, first of all, it's important that you know that these questions are not, we're going to be able to see the results on the screen, but you will not be identified. And so I say that because I really want you to think about these questions and be honest with yourself about them, about how you respond. Because you're not going to expose yourself, to anybody else. But I think it's important that we all be honest with ourselves as a first step in dealing with how we take care of ourselves in things like this. So be honest with the responses that you give. And then what we're going to do is we're going to just chat about each of these questions a little bit. And we want you to chime in. We want you to let us know if you have something to say, and we want to be able to unmute you. We want to unmute you so you can talk. We want to hear your voice. But if you're uncomfortable with that, that's okay too. Put your information in the chat or whatever, and then we can read it out or we can share it. But our preference would be that we hear from you in a verbal way. So I know there's a few people who have come on since we started actually going through this webinar. And so the slide that's going to come up, you will see a website called slido.com, and then you will see a code number, or you will see a QR code that you can use as well. We just ask you to either on a device and in the browser address line, type in the website address, slido.com, or you can scan the QR code and it will take you to this poll. And then you won't have to sign in anymore. It will, anytime we have a poll come up, it will automatically change for you. So let's go to the first question. First question is, which of these physical symptoms might you be experiencing? And if you want to think about it in relation to work, you can, but I mean, I think this is really a universal question. But click any of them that apply to you. If there's more than one, you have the ability to click more than one. And then of course there is the option for all of them or none of them. Definitely lower energy is rising to the top. There are some people who are experiencing all of these. Sleep challenges.
Yeah,
Appetite. Those are big
3
ones.
o'clock in the morning wake up, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And change in appetite can go both ways. Right, a loss of appetite or an increase in appetite.
Exactly. It's interesting, although expected, but that nobody checked nobody checked none of them.
Oh, we got 4%.
4%.
Oh, 4%. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So, Jody, Quinn, like, what stands out for you here? What would you like to say about this? And
Well, I think that one of the things that leaps out to me, and it's very much tracks with my experience, is that top one. The lower energy or pronounced fatigue or exhaustion. I think that's something that began to happen early in the pandemic. And then looking down the barrel of the end of our second year, it's almost become normal, right? That I know that many people I've talked to are just always tired, always a little more tired than they used to be. And I know that can have a lot of causes, from everything from disruptions of routine to changing eating habits to the constant stress of making adaptations within the context of trying to do your work in the pandemic, or there's constant stress of everything that's happening in the world, including but not limited to the pandemic right now, just bearing down on you 24 hours a day. And that can have a major effect on people.
I put an article in the chat that many of you, I'm sure, have already seen. But there was an article in the New York Times at some point during 2021. It all goes together these days, and I don't remember when it came out, but it was an article that talks about languishing. And the New York Times talked about that feeling of languishing being the dominant feeling for 2021, and that sense of stagnation and emptiness that we're all feeling, waiting for something that we thought was going to be a few weeks or a couple of months to end. And here we are, fast forward 2 years later, and it's still here. And so I keep coming back to this article and sort of it. Oh yeah, it came out in April of 2021, and here we are, and it's still relevant today, which is probably the epitome of languishing, right?
Well, and
So
it changes for
piece.
And it changes for people. I am among the group of people who remembers kind of looking forward to lockdown when it first was announced. I was like, I have an excuse not to do the social things I don't really want to do anyways. And get to huddle in my house with my family, and I get to spend more time with them. And even for people who are a little bit homebodies like me, I'm done. I want to go outside. And I never thought I'd be there.
There's another article that I saw, and I can't remember where it was from, but originally it was check on the introverts. They're not okay. But check on the introverts now too. They're not okay. Or the extroverts first, but now the introverts are not okay either, and they're done, and we all want out. So it's a pretty common theme.
Yeah, and I put in the chat that if you were somebody who checked off the others that concern me, I would love to hear what some of those others are that you're experiencing, if you're open to sharing them in the chat, or we can talk about them. We're going to do a couple more questions, and then we're going to open it up to hear what your thoughts are and what you have to say.
And just FYI, if you do want to share those things, but you want it to remain anonymous to the chat, you can just send it to the hosts and panelists, or even message one of the hosts and they'll get it and nobody else will. And we will not reveal your name.
Right. Which is actually why you probably didn't see me post that question, because I somehow only sent it to the hosts and panelists. But anyways, yeah, let us know what some of the others are. So we've got restlessness and anxiety, and we're going to get into, so let's actually, on that note, let's go to the next question.
And thank you, Aaron, for pointing that out. I think that's a big one.
Yeah. So now we're going to talk about psychological or emotional symptoms that you might be experiencing. So again, choose any of them that fit for you. So you should have seen the slide automatically change or go to the next question on your device. There we go. So far, discouragement, sadness, and anger are leading the pack. Lots of anxiety, lots of negative thoughts.
And I think that this is, we're talking to a group of people who work in a field where we need to stay hopeful. You have to have a sense of almost optimism in the work that we do on a daily basis to get through. And so it's concerning for me when I see folks talking about feeling these ways, because we're oftentimes needing to be a source of strength for others. And if you feel that on your shoulders, in addition to all of these other feelings, it can be really tough and challenging.
Sure. Much higher percentage of people indicating that they're experiencing all of these in this category.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think part of the negative and pervasive thoughts that crop up, you know, a lot of the literature is indicating that people tend to obsess about, you know, COVID related things, tend to obsess about symptoms. And, you know, I know that, you know, there are people in my family that for the first while, especially, it was hard for them to take their eyes away from news and TV. And
well, we have a new word now, doom scrolling.
Right.
Where you're going through social media and looking at all the things that give you anxiety or make you angry, and you just stay there scrolling through that stuff hour after hour and just taking all that negativity on yourself.
Mm-hmm.
I live in a CBC household where the radio used to be on all the time, but we have a daughter who's young, and I started to realize that it was impacting her because she was listening to the same news we were. So we shut it off, and that comes at a cost, because on one hand, you don't have that negativity in the house anymore, but I crave knowing what's going on. So it's a real difficult thing, right? But I realized I was taking in way too much of it, and as a result, so was she.
Yeah. Totally. Okay, let's go to the next question. So now it's behavioral. So what are some of the behavioral things that you're seeing for yourself? And in the chat we have, while people start plugging in their polls, their poll votes. Leslie commented, I think the hardest part of working remote is not able to talk to coworkers about how this pandemic is emotionally and physically affecting people. It's nice that you are sharing your personal feelings. Makes us feel that it's real. Well,
It's real.
and I, you know, appreciate that comment, and I think that you've hit on something that's really key and important, is that one of the challenges is that people struggle with that. Like, what is really real in all of this? And are the things I'm experiencing, the things I'm feeling, are they real? Are they normal? Am I the only one who's feeling this way? And so that's a big part of why we wanted to do this today, is to let people realize that you're not alone, and that it is a normal thing. It may not always be healthy based on where you're at with it, but it doesn't change that it's normal and that it's something that a lot of people are experiencing.
And I think that one of the consequences of the mass move over to remote work or individual work for people all over the place has been that during that transition, it was done on an emergency basis. It wasn't done with thoughtfulness and foreplanning. And so there's been, for a lot of people, a lack of investment in organizationally in how to increase camaraderie, and that kind of sense of team, that sense of we're on this together, that people did get when they were in person, that is maybe more difficult, or at least has to be done very differently when you're doing remote work. And that can increase those feelings of isolation. Even if you are seeing other workers in video meetings, you're not having that water cooler conversation about, oh man, I'm not feeling well today and stuff, you know. And those kinds of things are things that I think that we might have needed a little more investment, a little more focus on during this process is something we're going to probably be investing in and focusing on as a society going forward.
There, sorry. If I wanted to talk, I could have just started talking. Sherry Turkle is an author who talks about our shift to online communications and texting, and the decrease in actually calling people up and having conversations that are verbal conversations. And she sort of, in a couple of the books that she's written, argues that we need to go back to that art of having conversations rather than texting people. And we've gotten to a place in our society where sometimes, and I have friends, I'm a talker. I want to talk on the phone, but I have friends where I feel like I can't actually talk to them because I'm crossing a boundary if I don't text first. And so in this, Susan and Tim have both talked about, needing to debrief and the sense of isolation. And there have been comments about things like that, where we're in a field where we need to talk to folks. And if we have that barrier that's been created in our society where it's almost inappropriate to phone somebody and you're doing this work on your own, it's even a more uphill battle. So I am starting to just call people rather than text them, the folks that I normally would just text. I'm starting to just press the dial button instead, because I need a voice on the other end of the line, not this all the time.
Yeah. Okay,
Erica, I just want to point out that Erica posted something really important for some of the people. This is something that we as trainers hear a lot, actually, which is I started my career as a social worker when the pandemic started, and it was really difficult to get the proper training in order to do my job well. And this is something that we actually have been encountering all over the country. Is that people who have begun new positions or who have just come into this sector during this period, they've came into a period when it was all hands on deck and people were kind of working out of position or doing kind of emergency work that needed to get done right now. No one had time to onboard. No one had time. You're kind of just thrown into the work very quickly. And that can induce a ton of anxiety. And certainly it can create a sense that I've been doing this for a long time, but I still don't feel like I know what I'm doing. And that is a really important reality. And it's one that we're seeing a lot of right now, as many organizations are starting to recognize that and going back and reinvesting in a little bit of the training that they might have missed over the last little while.
And I've heard a lot of things around folks who've started careers in this field or in nursing or in social work or social services work since the pandemic and are burning out before they even begin. So, looking forward to getting out and practicing, and it's not what they thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
I think that highlights, a challenge that a lot of organizations have. And so a message for people who might be in a manager or supervisory role in your organization. Oftentimes, what we tend to do when there's something like a pandemic happening is the opposite of what we should be doing. Because, and in this case, when we feel like we're in a crisis, the urge is to speed up. The urge is to almost busy yourself and inundate yourself with all of the work that comes along with crisis management. And instead, and so things like what Erica is talking about get pushed to the background. When the time that you take to slow down and still maintain those good practices will actually probably help you out more in the end than just rushing in to nothing but crisis mode, because you're going to have people that are healthier. You're going to have people that are more dialed into the actual work that they're supposed to do, and they feel better about the work that they're doing. And as opposed to just rushing through things and then people feeling like they're flying by the seat of their pants and they're not really sure what's going on. Right? So just my message there is that it's important to sort of take that time to stop and think about, okay, what's going to be the best move here for everybody involved. And, it's hard because, most of you are dealing with very marginalized, very at-risk people, and there's stress and worry about what's going to happen to them in a situation like this. And so we tend to put all of our eggs into that basket. And we forget about, putting some eggs in the baskets of the people who are supporting those individuals. And I think in the long run, all parties involved will be better off if we make sure that it's a sort of a well-rounded approach. So I want to go on to one more slide here before we have some open discussion. So if you are concerned about these areas, are you confident about the steps that you would or should take? Okay, yes, I'm very clear what I would do. Not very clear, somewhat, little unsure, have no idea. Honestly, where are you at with whether you know what you should or could do if there were concerns in these areas? And see what we're seeing show up very quickly is something that I expected. And that is that there is going to be a majority of people who probably have a decent idea, but there are going to be people who are really sort of on the fence. And some that don't know and are probably floundering a little bit, probably wondering how do I deal with this? I have no idea. And, and hopefully your organization is one that can provide you with some guidance there as well. But oftentimes people that don't know, their organization probably doesn't or isn't providing them with a lot of that input or support in that way.
I'm going to go out and say as well, sorry, Jody, that I've heard from a lot of people about this issue who've said, well, I know what I'm supposed to do, I just can't do it. And to me, that suggests that what you think you know, you might not know.
Can you say more about that, Quinn?
Well, if what you're supposed to do about the steps you could or would take, but you can't bring yourself to do them, then those are the wrong steps.
And I was going to feed off of exactly what you said, Quinn, and looking at this and seeing that almost 70% of people said they were either somewhat or very clear on what they need to do. How many of those 70% are actually doing the things that they need to do? Because I'll tell you, I've gone through some tough stuff this year. And I keep saying, I'm going to get help for that. I'm going to do this, or I'm going to do that, or I'm going to work out, or I'm going to talk to somebody, or I'm going to get a massage. Is it happening? No, theoretically. And that's exactly it. Susan's saying we don't practice what we preach to our clients. And so we're really good at telling folks what they need to do and where the services are that they could access. But we're not so good at putting that oxygen mask on for ourselves. And that's a huge piece of this. Making sure that you've taken care of yourself before you continue to try to spread yourself too thin for everybody else around you.
Mm-hmm.
I asked her privately in the chat, but I'm actually wondering if Leslie would feel open to sharing a little bit more about her comment related to people feeling frozen. So
just FYI, you actually asked me and Jody.
Oh, well, I had her in there, and it said to her as well. Anyway,
oh, okay.
So Leslie, are you okay with that? Maybe we'll unmute Leslie. When do you want to unmute Leslie? And then if she wants to talk, she can. If you don't want to talk, then just go ahead and say Leslie. But I would love to hear more about what that means, and what being frozen is all about.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, perfect.
Welcome to our show.
Yeah, no, I think it's just like speaking for myself and other people that I've talked to, you just feel like you're stuck and you don't like you may have like EAP programs or things like that, or maybe you don't. And you're just like, you almost feel like Groundhog Day. Like you get up and you just get through your day and you don't you don't know what else to do. Like you're just that's just the word I'm finding is that you're just frozen. You just and it's like what people are saying, you read things, you read articles, you know what the signs are, but you literally are just frozen. You don't know what to do. Or at least that's how I'm feeling.
The image I get as you talk is sort of a walking zombie, right? Like, you know, you're just sort of going through the motions, almost numb to things.
Like even just I was going to put in the chat about laughing about wearing hoodies all day, but in the same sense, it's like I wear the same hoodie. You know, it's not getting up and putting makeup on and getting, you know, dressed up and feeling good about yourself.
Yeah.
Right.
I think Leslie also, you know, some of the people that I've spoken to, Omicron did a little bit of a fake out on us. You know, it's like the universe playing whack-a-mole. Anybody who was brave enough just before Omicron hit to start putting our heads up and our necks out and peek at the horizon and start planning, and then whack, we were sort of back where we are now. And so it almost feels like if you do start to feel optimistic again, are you going to be allowed to sustain that or not?
Totally. Thank you, Leslie. You know, I would guess that there's a lot of people who can resonate with that, for sure. I'm thinking that we should maybe pick on Susan Roberts as well. I'd love to hear more about this idea about not practicing what we preach to our clients. I'd love to know what some of those things are that we preach to our clients, but yet don't practice ourselves. Susan, are you okay with sharing a little bit more about that?
Whoops. Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Okay. Just that it's all because we reread stuff and, you know, from our education and how to, you know, take care of yourself, eat, sleep. We tell our clients this, but we have to remember it ourselves. I think part of it's because we're used to putting their needs first. We're focused on them and we forget to take care of ourselves. What's that saying, you know, about like the tube when the boat's going down, you gotta put yours on first, or the parachute or whatever?
Oh, right.
The oxygen in a plane, you mean?
That's what it is. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. So Susan, what have you found, if anything, to help yourself get back on track with that kind of thing? What kinds of things have you done to assist yourself in practicing what you preach to your clients?
We chat with coworkers. We chat on Microsoft Teams, which helps. Sometimes just because you are at home, you can relax a little bit, I think. I find I'm not multitasking as much if I'm at home. There's just kind of pros and cons out of the whole thing, but mostly just to keep that social network going with coworkers is really important. Chatting online.
Yeah.
And trying to keep a routine still at home too. So you don't maybe have a lunch time the same and it's hard to get out and go for a walk at lunch now. That I'm struggling with.
Well, and I think, and I don't know if this makes sense to you or not, but I think that with the whole shift to a lot of people working from home, it's become more difficult to separate work life and home life.
Totally. Yep.
And so we've got to find ways to draw clear boundaries between those things, right?
I've literally added a alarm on my phone that when it goes off, I know it's time for me to step away from my work. Because that was the only thing that stopped me from just kind of maybe not working as hard, but I would kind of just keep piddling away at projects all night. And I had to kind of create that mental barrier with myself for that very reason. I realized that I was never not working, at least a little bit.
Another thing that's really helpful is scheduling time for coffee breaks with your coworkers and making that sort of a legitimate part of your day. You know, that Teams meeting with coworkers for a few minutes just to see how things are going, because it can be super isolating if you're not doing that. And we don't have that same water cooler chat or that ability to walk by their office and in frustration say, I got to talk to you about this thing. You actually have to make the point of doing that. And so making peace with yourself about the fact that that's a legitimate piece of the day, and scheduling those times to chat with folks.
So let's talk about this a little bit further. Let's talk about, you know, ideas that can help us address this issue of, you know, because I think as we see here, the majority of people are pretty clear about what steps to take. But it's the doing that is the challenge, as Quinn was referring to, and as was just described to us here. So what would be some of those other strategies? I'd love to hear from you folks. What are some of the other things that you have done to make sure that you are practicing what you preach, to make sure that you practice the things that you know to be helpful, but maybe have let go by the wayside? Jody, I see that, you know, you plugged some more resources into the chat. You might want to explain what some of those are. And then, of course, you know, you guys bring up any thoughts you have about some good steps to take along the lines of, you know, coffee breaks and those kinds of things. But let's talk about some of those. So what do people out there do? And what do we implement?
I want to highlight what Leslie just said about having a wellness buddy, somebody on your team, a coworker that you regularly check in on. That is just amazing. That's gold. And there's a question from Aaron about circulating resources shared here. I can send out some of the resources. We'll put them all together and send them out in a document to everybody afterwards. One of the resources that I've put in here, a couple of them, just the Access to Anxiety Canada, which is a great website with some good resources for folks experiencing anxiety. CAEH has some great mental health and COVID-19 information for professionals, like self-care, but not as Quinn hates self-care as in a bubble bath, but concrete things that folks who work as helpers, helping professionals can do for their own self-care. I've put in the link for Crisis Services Canada, which is a national hotline for people experiencing crisis. If you know of somebody who is experiencing crisis, or if you think that that's something that should be up on your wall in your workplace, please put that up there. It's a 24-hour hotline. And then the Provincial Health Services Association of British Columbia has a self-care starter kit document, and it's a PDF that goes through and really assesses for you some of the things that you could be doing to implement your own self-care strategies.
Yeah, just to be clear, from Jody's comment, I'm not opposed to bubble baths, but I am annoyed at the type of the way some people talk about self-care is like, well, you just need to take time and just have a bubble bath, as though that will fix all your problems. And first of all, sometimes during this pandemic, I've been like, what time do I have to do that? First of all, and second of all, that's not the kind of thing that's going to work for me, right? So yeah, that's the part about that I don't enjoy. But bubble baths are fine. Go and have a bubble bath if you like.
Wow.
Jennifer wrote that she took a month off to rest and reset. Not everyone has that luxury. And I would add to that, Jennifer, that not everyone gives themselves the permission to have that luxury. So even if you do have that, it's very, it's a great thing that you recognize that and we're able to say, look, this is something that I'm going to do and that I'm going to take advantage of. Because how many of us have vacation and at the end of the year, it's still there. It's not used. It's still sitting there because we have some sort of sense in our mind that we're obligated to be on 24/7.
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to talk a little bit about something else that was mentioned a little bit ago around routine and how important that is, because I think we get into what we think is a routine when really it's a rut, and there's a difference. And so when we talk about sleep and how important that is, you know, and Quinn talking about how do I have time for this or that or the other thing, you have to just make time for sleep. And if you're having difficulty sleeping, then creating a routine around getting ready for sleep is extremely helpful. So a wind down routine of some kind, something that will help you, you know, slowly relax and so forth. The last thing you want to be doing right before you go to sleep is be watching the news or be on a screen of some device, because there's plenty of research that indicates that is detrimental to you being able to fall asleep well. And with the things we've talked about, that's what a lot of people are doing. But it's important to create some sort of a way or method that you have that allows you to sort of slow down, wind down, and be able to relax a little bit before you actually go to sleep. And then another aspect of routine is then in the morning to start your day. Make sure that you have a routine that starts things on a positive note, right? Something that will help you feel good right off the bat. Some ideas of that are even just a very quick bit of yoga, or maybe a 5-minute mindfulness exercise or meditation exercise. Make sure you take time to have your cup of tea or coffee. I would suggest tea is better in that situation, just because caffeine tends to give us a false sense of energy, right? And when in reality it's a suppressant, and caffeine will increase anxiety, as Jody has a drink of her coffee. Also, it can be helpful to get some of your thoughts out of your head onto paper. Take a few minutes and just write some thoughts down and think of some positive things to start the day. Because the one thing we don't want to do is, if you've got worries and stressors, to keep them bottled up, to keep them stuffed inside. So you've got to find a way to draw them out of you in some way, whether that's writing, whether that's talking to somebody about them, and so forth. So just a couple of things in relation to routine that I wanted to talk about.
And I think that, just being aware of what it is that we do need, and making sure that we're acknowledging what we need. We really have this tendency, especially in this sector, but in general, to think, well, that's what one person needs, or that's what everyone else needs, but I'm going to do this in a different way. And I don't know how many of you out there have that same sort of syndrome, but making sure that we can do everything for everyone and get it all done and wrap it up in a bow and be ready to do all of the other things as well. And that's not how it needs to work. We can rely on each other and reach out.
And on that note, Jody, reaching out, sometimes people struggle with that because they feel like they're going to be a burden on someone else. Yeah. and so forth. But I think it's important that people try to push beyond that fear and that worry. And one thing that can help with that is actually making a list, sitting down and making an actual list of people that you can reach out to, that are safe to reach out to. And by safe, I mean that they're not going to disregard your feelings or emotions. They're not going to belittle you for struggling with something or whatever, that they're just going to be people that are open to hearing you and will listen and can have some empathy. And even some people that are really close to us in our lives aren't necessarily safe that way because it's difficult for them. But that doesn't mean that they're a bad person. It's just a hard thing for some folks. Quinn, you had a comment.
Yeah, I just wanted to pivot over to talking about this general concept that keeps being brought up in a couple of different ways about guilt. Right? And you kind of alluded to it just in your conversation. I'm seeing comments in the chat about saying, well, I know what you're saying about limit screen time, but I found it helpful to watch something that didn't have anything to do with my life. And I found that some of the conversations about self-care have been a little problematic in that, like, everybody should do this.
Yeah.
And then you kind of feel guilty for not doing the thing. And it adds to your anxiety rather than helping you with it. And I think that what you said, Wally, is very important to just really highlight, is that your self-care and your self-care plan and the way you assess your personal situation and how you're going to move forward with all of that is going to be very, very different than everybody else's. For one person, limiting screen time before bed is critical. For the next person, unwinding while watching something that gets their mind off of everything is critical. There's neither of those are the wrong thing to do. It just may be the right or wrong thing to do for you.
Yep.
Now, the challenge with understanding that is to be honest with yourself.
Yep.
And to really think about, well, I like watching that show before I go to sleep, but is it actually helping me get to sleep, right? Or whatever the thing is, right? To actually reflect on those things. But yeah, I agree with you. The person that, I think I lost it in the chat, the person that's talked about watching a show, that's exactly what I do. I have shows that I watch just before I go to sleep, and they help me transition from worrying about the day to dreamy land. I don't know.
Yeah, there's a
Super.
comment. There's
Sorry,
a comment in the
Jody.
chat. Sorry, go ahead. Do you want to go first?
I was just going to say, super great point, and I really appreciate you bringing that up, because it really has to be about what works for you individually. And so I agree with that completely, because for me, if I'm sitting there and it doesn't matter how tired I am, if I'm watching TV at the end of the day, I will almost wake myself up to make sure that I don't stop flipping channels or whatever, right? And so for me, it just creates a general lack of sleep. But for you, that's different. So that's so important that we individualize it. And the last thing I'm going to say is that I think that we have to remember that what we want to do is whatever works for you that puts you in a place where you are more healthy. Right. And so I think what's important is defining what more healthy looks like. How do I know when I'm in a place where I feel healthier? How do I know what's happening for me when I am in a good space physically, mentally, behaviorally, all of those things, right? What does that look like? And that's something that we can probably talk about down the road, because before I give it back to Jody, I just wanted to say for people, because I know we have some people who have to go, but we're going to continue on for the hour and a half, because that's what we scheduled as long as we got people here. But one of the things that we wanted to do is get a sense of whether having a regular opportunity to come together in a platform like this or in a venue like this, to be able to just have these kinds of conversations. And if it would be beneficial to you if we were sort of facilitating that process and hosting that process, so that you had a space, at the very least, you knew that, hey, once a month, I can go to that Canadian Alliance webinar about self-care and I can talk about what's bothering me, right? Again, we don't want it to be a therapy session. but we want it to be a therapeutic opportunity for people to be able to just discuss and talk. So if that would be helpful for you, let us know, because we're more than willing to make this something that is somewhat regular and occurring that way. So sorry, Jody, go ahead with what we.
No, I was going to say very similar comments to you, Wally. And I think it's about, when Quinn's saying, for one person, the screen time is beneficial and for another person it's not. And I think it's really about being honest with yourself and taking that inventory to say, what is it that I need? How am I going to care for myself? And how will I know that that's nurturing for me? We talk about exhaustion during COVID and during the pandemic. And for many people, that word just, it triggers, you need sleep. This isn't about that anymore. That article that I posted in the beginning about languishing, it looks different for different people. And so there was a comment about somebody who has kids, and at the end of the day, just the ability to reset, refocus to something else and not go to bed, but to do something else that is different from the day to day. And I know in my household, I'm the one who's home working remotely. My partner is out in the world doing stuff. And when we get to the door, it's almost like he wants to come in and hide, and I want to go see what news of the world, right? And so there's a real different approach to things. For me, getting out of this house and getting into the world and actually seeing what's going on is what's going to recharge me. For him, out in life, out there, what's going to recharge him is being here on the couch or doing whatever he's going to do. And so for all of us, we have a different way to make meaning of the exhaustion that we're experiencing. And it looks different for every single person. Quinn wants the bubble baths.
Not opposed, as long as it's not ocean water.
I don't. Okay. Ocean water bubble baths. We need to source that out for him. Well, I do see that there are a number of people who are saying that yes, this Wally would be of value on a regular basis.
Yeah. Well, and I think the fact that even after an hour of time, we still have, 30 people hanging in here to talk or to listen. So that's an indicator.
Yeah, normally they're dropping off by now.
I was going to mention something about breaks. Because you always hear people talk about, well, if you need a break, take a break. But I don't think that's as easily done than said. And part of the problem, and even if you're in an office still or working at home, I think there's a sense that people are only able to take a break a certain way or for a certain period of time or very structured kinds of things. And I think it's really important to make sure that you talk to your employer and ensure that you have permission to take a break in the way that works for you. Because it's not going to, just like we've been saying, it's not going to be the same for me as it is for Quinn. Quinn would benefit better from some other kind of break structure than I would. Some people, like Jody said, need to get outside. Other people would rather just sit and have a visit with somebody. Those kinds of things. So I would just say, try to structure breaks at home or at the office in a way that works for you, not just based on what you think is, well, I'm allotted 2 15-minute breaks a day kind of thing. And then you're set that way. One of the things that we've worked really hard in our team to do is to make sure that people know that they can do what they need to take care of themselves.
Yeah.
I believe that Jody is going to be useless to me if she's not doing well, right? If she's not doing well. And so I would rather invest in the time with her to make sure that she is taken care of and she is feeling better than to have to struggle with her with things later on, right? And so It's way more important to me to have people feel good, which is, again, back to the oxygen mask analogy, right? But break times are important, and also along with that is the idea of shifting gears. You have to shift gears from time to time, and you have to turn your mind to something different. If you don't, that's how you get caught in these ruts. And then you go to bed thinking about something, you wake up thinking about something, you spend all day working and doing things based on what you're thinking about. And if you never shift gears, it's going to be problematic for you.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Jody. Sorry.
I think that that break piece is really important too. There's a comment in here about I'm working remotely, and when I take a break, I clean the house. That's not a break, and I'm guilty of it too. Really assessing what is it that you are doing, and how much are you actually taking a break. There's that sense, and I went through a period of time, and I'm lucky to have a partner who's supportive, but I went through a time where, by the end of the day, I wanted to finish my day, wrap it up, and make sure the house was clean at the same time. If I were in an office, I would not be cleaning my house. And so that expectation of making sure that by the end of the day, the house is clean is not realistic within the context of work. And so those are those balances, and those are those moments where you have to be aware of what it is that you're doing and see whether or not it's within the realm of superhuman or just human, and do what you can, right? Yeah. I don't finish my day and have dinner on the table in a clean house anymore. It can't happen, because that is what, Wally's put on the screen here. That's burnout.
Yeah. So just on that note, and I want to let people know too that we are recording this, and so the recording of this will be available later for people to review if they need to leave early or whatever. But yeah, I have another question that I want to ask folks that are still in the room, but I just posted in the chat some simple ideas. If you've only got 5 to 30 minutes for a break, well, there's some ideas there that you could do that it could actually be really helpful and doable in that time limit. On another note, I want to give you some ideas if you have, let's say, 30 to 60 minutes for a break time, and I'm going to plop that in here too. Oh, I guess maybe I didn't hit return. So there you go. And then there's some 30 to 60 minute ideas. But regarding burnout, I'm curious to know if you've ever experienced these in your workplace. Work overload or heightened pressure? Probably not. Lack of feedback and support from your managers, teammates suffering from burnout, role conflict or ambiguity in your roles at work, a lack of equity and fairness, a lack of involvement in decision making, and then a values disconnect. Right? Have you experienced any or all of those at all?
And that broken psychological contract between your employer and you.
Yes. Now, if you're not sure what that means, when you start a job, as you have interactions with your employer and other coworkers, you begin to develop sort of an unspoken understanding of what your role is, what your job is, what's expected of you. Then all of a sudden that changes. That's the broken contract that we're talking about. And the reason I put these up and why it's associated with burnout is because little do people know that these are actually indicators of a burnout environment. These are indicators of things that are going to generate burnout at your workplace. And so they're things that would be important to pay attention to talk about in your workplace, talk about with your team, and see if some of these things can be addressed in some way. There's huge research that talks about the connection between workplace or team engagement and burnout, right? The lack of it, the lack of engagement of employees leads to high levels of burnout. And so a lot of these things work to eliminate engagement. So it looks like, what do we see here? So work overload for sure is high. Teammates suffering from burnout. So what does that tell you, right? If you have people on your team that are burning out, that, to be honest, burnout can be contagious. And if other people are suffering and struggling in your workplace, then it starts to feel like a lot more is being piled on you. Now you feel heightened pressure and stress and responsibility. And not that you're upset with your teammates that are feeling burnt out, but you now start to feel all of this extra stuff, and it starts leading you to burnout. Role conflict or ambiguity. Yeah, interesting. Important stuff. So Jody, you asked a question of Erica.
Yeah. Erica, you commented that in previous places you might have checked off more, but right now you wouldn't check off any. I'm wondering if there are specific things that you or your employer are doing that are contributing to a more positive environment right now.
Great question.
And I think that this is something for anybody who's in this call right now, who is in a leadership role or in and I mean leadership both in a formal or informal way, to be thinking about what it is that you can be doing to support folks in your environment. Wally talks about, making sure that we all, have what we need to take care of ourselves. And I would say that absolutely in my environment, that's the case. And I'm very thankful for that. And I'm very aware of how unique that situation is. I think that there are a lot of folks out there that aren't as fortunate to have somebody as supportive. But if you are in a leadership role, what can you be doing to ensure that you support folks? We have things that need to happen on a daily basis, but how can you make that happen in a way that is positive for your staff? And what things can you be doing for them to make sure that that happens? Yes, that is mine, and I have no idea what it is. I can only say that I suspect it's Kids Messenger, and a child somewhere is going rogue with my child's Kids Messenger, and I can't get to it. I apologize.
Okay, one last slide while Erica thinks about, maybe that question. Others of you may have responses to that too. Like what helps or assists you in your work environment to avoid burnout, to feel connected to your team, to feel supported? What are the things that are occurring for you? And then just the last slide I'm going to throw up here, and we can continue to talk, is just kind of an overview of areas to focus on in regarding self-care, in particular during something like this pandemic. And I want to just talk about a couple of these. So recognizing and validating grief. Have all of you thought that there might be grief associated with what's going on with COVID? And I'm not just talking about grief if you've lost a family member due to COVID. I'm talking about grieving the loss of what was your normal lifestyle. I'm talking about grieving the changes that you've had to make in the way you operate in your home. Grieving not being able to go to a movie when you normally do, or a restaurant. There is absolutely grief associated. And I know that sometimes when we use the word grief, it sounds overwhelming, but it's important to understand it for what it is. Any kind of loss, you experience a level of grief. That doesn't mean that it's going to hang on forever and cripple you, But if you don't acknowledge it, it's going to have a better chance of doing that. Mindfulness, that came up earlier. It's important to find ways that there's all kinds of resources on the internet about mindfulness, good quality stuff. There's great mindfulness podcasts, various things like that. Separating out what you can and can't control. Huge. There's so many things about this pandemic that you or I have no control over whatsoever. Doesn't matter how many news broadcasts I watch. It doesn't matter how many politicians I listen to. It doesn't matter how many of my neighbors I discuss it with. There are some things that you can't control, but yet we brood over them. It's important to identify those and then be able to let them go. Focus on the things that you can control, and you'll see huge improvement in how you feel about things. Connecting with nature. Jody talked about getting outside, how important that's been for her. Quinn talked about how in his life, he's normally not super anxious to be outdoors, but yet now, because of all of this, that's something he's almost hungry for.
Yeah.
We talked about taking breaks from the news, letting your managers, letting your employers know about your worries. Let them know. They can't help you and be understanding and supportive of you if they don't know what they are. Now, if you don't have that type of relationship, if it's a struggle, then you may have to figure out some other things that you can do, but you should have somebody.
And leaders, building that into your practice as a leader, if you are one, thinking about what you can be doing moving forward.
Right. Which leads to, one way or another, connect with other people. Don't allow yourself to be hibernating during all of this. Gratitude. And I think this fits with, understanding what we can control and can't control in some ways. That if we can think about the things that, regardless of what's going on around us, the things that we are grateful for, that are important to us in our lives. And, some people have talked about, creating gratitude journals and things like that. And that's a great idea. But one of the problems that people have with a gratitude journal is that they don't spend enough time thinking deeply about it. It's important to actually, some people will say, it doesn't matter even if you write the same thing every day. That's a lie. It does matter. Because if you find yourself writing the same thing every day, then it actually starts to play games in your head, and you start thinking, I don't have anything else to be grateful for. But everybody does. We just don't give it enough time to really think and dig deep about that. So if you're going to do that, and it can be extremely helpful and healthy activity, let yourself dig deep and really sift through your life and pick out small little things that you can express gratitude for. We talked about routine and flexibility, and then taking care of your body and so forth. So there's many, many more. This is just kind of a rough overview. So I'm curious, Quinn and Jody, if you have some thoughts that you might want to share just as we kind of wind down here. Anything that else you want to add to this? And I think we've got another comment here in the chat from Leslie. But anything you guys want to say at this point?
I actually just wanted to comment on Leslie's comment. Leslie wrote, self-care almost needs to be built into job roles. I would say needs to, not even almost, and take away from the feeling of guilt of doing those things during the workday. And I think, again, I don't want to harp on this, and yet I am, and I do. We are in the business of helping folks, and yet we sometimes don't help ourselves, and we don't build within our routines and our organizations the infrastructure to help the folks who are helping the folks. And so making sure that staff are taken care of, And they are your front line. They are your best defensive against doing all of the work that you can't do it without them. And so we need to take care of staff. We need to make sure that they are nurtured and cared for just as much as the folks that we are serving out in the world. And I don't think that can be underlined enough. If we didn't have staff to do the work that we are doing, it's not going to get done.
Yeah, and I just want to add to that, that to the leaders, to the directors, to the supervisors, to the managers, in all the organizations and communities across the country, many of you have reacted to the anxiety you're feeling by kind of over managing a little bit. And I know that some of you know that, and some of you are trying to learn a new way of doing that. I need you to understand that that's a symptom of the same things that we talked about today. And self-care starts with you. And I don't mean it starts with you just in that you need to take care of your staff. You need to take care of yourself first.
Yeah, that's awesome stuff, guys. And you know, just to maybe pick up on something that Jody had mentioned as well, that, you know, this idea of building sort of self-care into your work, into your job description, into your, you know, employment HR policy manual, even, you know, like, I think that's such a brilliant thought. And, you know, you heard my team, or you heard Jody talking about how, you know, she feels lucky to be in an environment where she can take care of herself. And we say that, but there may be places that say that also, but that doesn't necessarily guarantee it. You know, there's still that underlying thought. And I'd be willing to bet that Jody and Quinn, even though I think they feel pretty confident about being able to do whatever they need to do to care for themselves, there's still probably been times, and in fact, I'm gonna out Jody. I know there have been times where she, in a one-on-one with me, has said, like, I feel bad because I feel like that over this last week, because she had something go on, that she wasn't pulling her weight.
Yeah.
That tells me that even though we've talked about it, even though she's been given that opportunity, there'd still be something extra there to be able to know that it's actually written in a formal document for your work, that you're allowed to do this. You're allowed to take the time, or do whatever it is that you've outlined in your organization. So I'm actually going to take that idea, Leslie, and bring that forward to our leadership and talk about how I think we need to, even in our organization, be a little bit more specific and a little bit more purposeful about identifying in writing people's ability to do self-care at work.
And I would, you know, further that and talk to folks in leadership roles in this call. Are you the person who is super supportive and you're telling your staff, take the time you need and don't work outside of hours? And then are you inadvertently sending emails at 6:30 in the morning or 10 o'clock at night and sending a cue to your staff that they need to be on at that same time? Are you doing those things? Is it do as I say and not as I do, because you're holding yourself to a different standard, but inadvertently giving cues to your staff that they should be doing the exact same thing? Because that is toxic, and you may not mean it in the way that you are. It's done with the best of intentions. But when we need to give ourselves grace, we need to give all of us grace.
Mm.
And that starts with you too.
Good point.
So the last thing I'm going to say is, and it's going to appear to be, and maybe in a way it kind of is, a shameless plug, but I posted a link to something called The Working Mind. And this is actually a training that was developed by the Mental Health Commission of Canada. And the point of it is to be able to, there's a program or a training that is for managers, and then there's a training that is for frontline staff. And it's actually to help organizations be better equipped to notice, understand, and monitor the mental health of themselves as managers and their organizational staff and so forth. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because we have been able to establish a partnership with the Mental Health Commission, where all three of us, Jody, Quinn, and myself, are going to be able to be trained as trainers so that we can provide this training to organizations and people in the homelessness serving sector.
Yeah.
Typically, the Mental Health Commission only trains people to train in their own organization, but we've been able to solidify this partnership so that we can do that. And so there will, as of April, at some point in April, you'll start seeing information about us being able to start doing trainings in this area for you guys. We'll be organizing some trainings and so forth. So this is something else that I think will be helpful in terms of organizational self-care.
I'm super excited about it.
All right. Thank you so much, everybody, for all of your comments, for your participation. I think that this is something that we will start to organize and structure on a regular basis. In a sense, it will be our own homelessness sector self-care support group. And we'll, as a team, look forward to meeting up with you folks in several different occasions in the next coming months so that we can talk about these things, bring you new resources, bring you new ideas, and listen to the great things that you are doing and accomplishing and learning about this area in your own work too. So on behalf of myself, I want to thank you guys all for participating and joining us today. Quinn and Jody, if you want to say goodbye, we'll let everybody get back to whatever it is they need to do.
Yeah, thank you so much. If you know others who might benefit from it in the future, send the contact information when you know about this. We welcome everybody.
Yeah, thanks so much, everybody. Really appreciate you joining us today and for being thoughtful and being open. And just generally, we really appreciate you.
Absolutely.
Take care, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Yeah.
We'll talk soon.
Have a good afternoon.